Gracias, Marta y Sernos, Raquel Herrero. 8:40 de la mañana está con nosotros Gergely Majoros, miembro del Comité de Inversión de Carmignac. Good morning, Gergely. Thanks for having this time with us.
Good morning, thanks for having me.
What's your perspective about this 2022?
Look, in terms of outlook, the major issue for investors for today and for the coming months is inflation, and more particularly inflation expectations and their impact on central bank policies and rate markets going forward. If you put it simply, we are facing a global tightening cycle from central banks, and this is a very different environment compared to what we have been enjoying over the last quarters and even years. And if you put on top of that the fact that the global cycle is fading, which is not dramatic yet, because growth rates will be fine, but we are still having less growth this year than last year. If you add all this together with the global tightening, this is a very different, difficult environment for central bankers and investors as well.
What do you think about these high rates in United States, about Fed? 4, 5, 6, 3. What's your opinion about what quantity of high hikes could make Fed this 2022?
Yes, let me be a bit more specific. We do believe that inflation is going to be more sticky in the coming quarters and years in the US compared to what many people and investors believe. We do believe that central banks are going to be hawkish and even more hawkish than what many people believe. And therefore, we believe that the main risk for rate markets is steered to the upside. And in this environment, we have to be prudent, especially for equities. And that's the reason why we have reduced our exposure levels for equities, at least for the short term, because this environment is quite difficult. In the longer term, still we have to say that equities are more attractive as an asset class than the bonds as an asset class.
Which sectors do you like the most?
For equities, we are focused really on companies which are able to deliver a nice growth going forward. So what we would call the visible growth, the quality names with reasonable valuation. And let me explain that. On the one hand, it will be very important to really be invested in companies that can deliver growth in a more difficult environment. And of course, the ones that will be able to deliver to the expectations of the market. But what is also very important is that we must pay attention a lot to valuation, because in this new environment, this new market regime, investors will not be willing to pay the same multiples as what they used to pay for 6 months ago or 12 months ago. And therefore, we have to, to be more specific, be invested in companies in the sectors like healthcare, like consumer or technology, but with this attention to the valuations, which have to be reasonable and not the wide ones that we have seen over the last couple of quarters. And on the contrary, what we have also to say for the so-called value sectors, we have to be prudent here, because we believe in that new environment, especially with the macro momentum which is fading, they will not get enough support to perform. There is, however, one exception to that, which is the energy sector, where we do believe that there are structural tailwinds that will support this sector, and that's the reason why we have invested there.
Where do you see investment opportunities in equities and other part of the economy?
So for this kind of quality names, we do exactly the same for globally. From the US to emerging markets, we exactly have the same way of finding those quality names. But let me maybe focus a little bit on emerging markets and China. China could be a very interesting market for 22, especially after the very challenging year 21 for investors, especially in the tech space, because there is a good chance, that the Chinese leadership decides to re-stimulate its economy, because the slowdown is getting harsher and harsher. Or put it differently, China has been the first one in 20 to exit the crisis, to really rebound. It has been actually slowing down for a number of months and quarters now. So therefore, there's a good likelihood that they stimulate the first one, their economy again. And this could be a game changer for markets because the Chinese stimulation will have repercussions on the global basis. And let me add the fact that if you think that some of the issues that investors had in 21 in Chinese tech companies, for example, with the regulatory wave, or for example, the Evergrande issue in the real estate sector, we do think that there's a good chance that these issues will fade progressively further. And with the current valuations that you can see in China, China could be a very good market in 22.
What do you think about tech companies after we know the Meta results this night?
Look, for tech, as I told you, we have to be very selective. In the short term, the volatility probably will be great because we are in this new liquidity market regime. But over the longer term, we believe that this is exactly the kind of quality names that you have to focus on. These are the most attractive. But of course, you have to pay a lot of attention to the fact that expectations for numbers in cash flows, in profits are very high. And you have to select the ones, of course, which is not easy, by the way, that the ones that will not disappoint, because as you can see, the markets tend to react very harshly to disappointments.
Thank you very much, Gergely Majoros, miembro del Comité de Inversión de Carmignac. Thanks for having this time with us. Good day, good business. 8:46, enseguida vemos la apertura del mercado en el viejo continente. Vamos a ver si tiene fuerza para conseguir estar en términos o en posiciones verdes durante la jornada. Parece que va a ser una jornada muy pendiente de lo que diga el Banco Central Europeo a partir de las 2 menos cuarto, en ese comunicado, de las 2:30 de la rueda de prensa, y del Banco de Inglaterra. Como nos decía Martí, será a partir de la 1 de la tarde. Enseguida entramos en el detalle con Miguel Luzárraga, director para Iberia de Allianz Bernstein, de cómo han sido los mercados este